Everyone in town calls my husband a saint. They say he's a hero for standing by his dying wife. But saints don't plan murders with a smile, and heroes don't drug the woman they promised to protect. There are three things my husband doesn't know. First, I do not have dementia. Second, the pale blue capsule he presses into my palm every morning never reaches my stomach. And third, the old voice recorder hidden beneath the soil of my houseplant has captured everything, every whispered calculation, every careless promise, every step of his plan to erase me. Tonight is my husband's 70th birthday. The house is being prepared for a celebration. Balloons, champagne, guests, laughter, and I have prepared a gift that will make him wish he had finished the job when he still had the chance. If you're hearing this wherever you are, listen carefully. Some stories are uncomfortable, some truths ruin reputations, but silence is how monsters survive. And this is my story. My name is Alina Wright. I am 69 years old, and until recently I was known for my mind. I spent 4 decades teaching classical literature at a private college near the coast. I could recite entire passages of Milton without glancing at the page. I could dismantle a flawed argument in seconds. My mind was my identity. Now there are mornings when I catch my reflection in the hallway mirror and hesitate. Silver hair, pale skin, eyes that look frightened, unsure. I whisper my name aloud just to anchor myself. Alina, you are Alina. But the doubt always follows, quiet, poisonous, persistent. It began on a humid Tuesday evening in early spring. The air clung to everything, thick with pollen and damp heat. I stood alone in the kitchen of our century-old home on Laurel Avenue, staring into a pot on the stove. Something was wrong. The stew was boiling too hard, splattering, angry. The smell wasn't herbs and wine, it was sharp, burnt, sour. Panic crawled up my spine. How long had it been like this? Had I turned the burner down? Had I walked away? Ellie, a voice said gently from the doorway. My husband, Henry, stood there looking exactly like reassurance itself. Neatly pressed slacks, soft sweater, calm expression. At 70, he still carried himself like the respected pharmaceutical consultant he'd been for decades. People trusted him instinctively. So why did my stomach tighten the moment I saw him? He crossed the room, took the spoon from my trembling hand, and shut off the stove with a quiet click. "It's all right," he murmured. "This keeps happening, keeps happening." The words settled over me like a verdict. And just like that, doubt, not fire, became the most dangerous thing in the room. If memory is fragile, who decides what's real, the one who forgets or the one who convinces them they have? He never raised his voice. That was how he won. Monsters who whisper are far more dangerous than those who scream. Henry guided me away from the stove as if I were made of glass. His hands were steady, practiced, reassuring, the hands of a man who had counted pills and dosages for most of his adult life. He spoke softly, carefully, like each word was chosen to calm a skittish animal. "This is the 3rd time this week," he said, almost apologetically. "Do you remember, Ellie? 3rd time? No, that couldn't be right. I had cooked on Sunday. I remembered pasta. Steam on the windows, parmesan on the counter." I think it went fine," I said, uncertain now, hating the way my voice shrank. Henry sighed, a long, exhausted sound that carried more weight than anger ever could. "Sunday we ordered takeout. You left the oven on for hours. The alarm scared the neighbors." Images flashed in my head. A shrill noise, a blinking red light, or was that something I'd imagined after he mentioned it? The line between memory and suggestion blurred until I couldn't tell which side I stood on. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Shame burned hotter than the stove ever had. "I don't know what's wrong with me." Henry cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. The gesture looked tender. It felt clinical, detached, as if he were checking a pulse. "It's not your fault," he said. "Dr. Kaplan warned us this would happen. The confusion, the missing time, early cognitive decline is cruel that way." There it was, the phrase he had been feeding me in careful doses: cognitive decline. Not dramatic enough to fight, not clear enough to disprove. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that I still read the paper every morning, that I followed city politics, that I could still spot a typo in seconds. I wanted him to see me. Instead, I nodded. Because when the person you trust most tells you your mind is betraying you, arguing feels like proof that it already has. We sat in the study, surrounded by books I once taught with confidence. The spines stared back at me like old colleagues who no longer recognized my face. Henry moved to the cabinet where he kept my medications, his private domain since retiring. "Why trust a stranger with your prescriptions?" he'd once joked. "When you live with an expert?" He returned with a glass of water and a small cup. "Vitamins, a cholesterol tablet. And the blue one, that one always caught my eye. Too bright, too artificial. This helps keep you calm," Henry said smoothly. "It slows the progression, helps your brain rest." A warning flared in my gut, sudden, urgent. "What is it called again?" I asked. For a fraction of a second, something sharp crossed his face. Annoyance, impatience, then the mask slid back into place. "It's a newer compound," he said. "You won't find it online, trust me." He leaned closer. "Do you trust me, Ellie?" The question wasn't gentle, it was a test, and I failed it by swallowing the pill. If doubt is a symptom, what happens when the cure is the thing slowly stealing your will? The pill didn't steal my memory right away. It stole my resistance first, and that was far more dangerous. Within minutes, the edges of the room softened. The fear that had been clawing at my chest slowed, then dulled as if someone had wrapped my thoughts in thick wool. By the time I reached the top of the stairs, my legs felt heavy, my mind syrup-thick. "Get some rest," Henry called up gently. "I'll take care of everything." That was always his promise. I would rest, he would decide. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the framed photograph on my nightstand. We were younger then, standing near the ocean, wind tangling my hair, my laugh caught mid-motion. I barely recognized the woman smiling back at me. She looked certain, whole. As sleep dragged me under, I heard the front door open downstairs. Voices followed, Henry's, then a woman's, light, familiar, too early. "Did she take it?" the woman asked. "Out cold," Henry replied. "We've got time." I tried to sit up, tried to speak. My body refused. Panic surged as darkness swallowed me whole. The last thought that flickered before everything went black was sharp and terrifying. I had turned the stove off. I remembered it clearly. Morning arrived like an assault. Light burned through my skull. My mouth tasted metallic. I lay still, trying to piece myself together. Then I saw her. She stood by the window, pulling open the curtains with unnecessary force. Young, confident, smiling without warmth. "Rise and shine," she said brightly. "Who are you?" My voice cracked. She turned, smile widening. "I'm Claire. Your home care assistant. Don't you remember?" She wasn't wearing scrubs, just tight jeans and a fitted blouse. She smelled of perfume and impatience. "I don't need help," I said, pushing myself upright. The room spun. Claire clicked her tongue and blocked my path. Doctor's orders, you're a fall risk, and after last night, she shook her head. Henry was beside himself. The stove, again, doubt crept in, unwelcome and corrosive. Where is my husband? I asked. Golf, she said breezily. Caregiver burnout is real, you know, you don't want to be responsible for that. Guilt landed hard. I let her guide me to the bathroom. Her grip was firm, possessive. From that day on, Claire was everywhere. Rearranging my kitchen, changing channels, deciding what I ate when I slept, what I swallowed. The green pill in the morning made me slow, the blue one at night erased entire hours. But the worst part wasn't the drugs. It was the way Henry looked at her. The glances, the laughter, the intimacy that didn't belong to me anymore. One afternoon, I came downstairs early and heard voices in the kitchen. She's asking questions, Claire said sharply. About the accounts. She won't remember, Henry replied calmly. I adjusted the dosage. Adjusted. The word echoed like a gunshot in my head, and suddenly everything became terrifyingly clear. If forgetting is manufactured and confusion is prescribed, how do you prove the truth when no one believes you're sane? The most dangerous moment isn't when you realize you're being betrayed, it's when you understand how carefully it was planned. I stood frozen in the hallway, my socks silent against the rug, listening as my life was dismantled with casual efficiency. She corrected my grammar yesterday, Claire scoffed. It was unsettling. Are you sure the medication is strong enough? Henry laughed softly. I increased it. By next month she won't know her own signature. We just need the paperwork signed. Paperwork. My heart slammed against my ribs as I leaned closer, breath shallow. Once the authority is finalized, he continued, everything transfers cleanly, the house, the accounts. No complications. And after, Claire asked, her voice dropping, a pause, then fabric shifting, too close. We leave, Henry said, somewhere warm, somewhere quiet. I stepped back before my knees gave out. By the time I reached the bedroom, my hands were shaking violently. It wasn't dementia, it was design. I locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror. The frightened woman stared back, thinner, paler, but behind the fear something else flickered. Anger. I dug through the bathroom trash until I found the discarded foil from that morning's pills. No label, just an imprint code. My phone trembled as I searched. The result loaded instantly. Antipsychotic, high potency, side effects. Confusion, memory loss, emotional blunting. This wasn't treatment, it was chemical restraint. Relief hit first, then terror. If I confronted Henry, he would call it paranoia. If I ran, he would say I was confused. He controlled the narrative and the medicine. I had to become invisible, convincing. That night I performed, I slurred words, missed names, asked the same question twice. Let my gaze drift just a second too long, Henry watched, satisfied. Over the next days, I refined the act. I hid pills in my cheek, spit them into tissues, flushed evidence away. Withdrawal was brutal, headaches, tremors, but clarity returned, sharp and unforgiving. With my mind clear, I saw everything. Henry practiced forging my signature at the kitchen counter. Claire lounged nearby, scrolling on her phone. She won't notice, she said lazily. I know, Henry replied. She's gone already. Gone. They never noticed me sitting nearby, knitting badly, watching everything. I listened, I memorized, I waited. The opportunity came on a quiet afternoon. Henry left for golf. Claire went outside to smoke. I moved fast. Henry's study was locked, but the spare key was still where it had always been. Old habits die hard. Inside the filing cabinet was a red folder, transition plan. inside. Financial transfers, property liquidation, and a brochure for a state-run care facility. This wasn't care, it was disposal. I photographed everything, every page, every number. When I returned to my chair, Claire glanced at me and sneered. "You look worse today," I smiled vacantly. Inside, I was already planning his funeral and his arrest. She has the proof now, but evidence alone doesn't save you when the people trying to destroy you are already 3 steps ahead. Evidence can disappear, confessions last forever if you survive long enough to hear them. Photos on my phone were a start, but they weren't enough. A judge could dismiss them. A doctor could question my competence. Henry had too much credibility, too much control. I needed his voice. Buried in the attic was an old digital recorder I once used to archive lectures. Henry never threw anything away. He underestimated nostalgia. I waited until the house slept. At 2 in the morning, I crept upstairs, every step measured, every breath controlled. Dust coated my fingers as I found the box labeled MISC. The recorder still worked. Saturday night was perfect. Wine night, their favorite ritual. By the second glass, they forgot caution. I shuffled into the living room, feigning exhaustion. "I'm going to lie down," I murmured. As I passed the large houseplant beside Henry's chair, I stumbled deliberately, rustling the leaves. "Careful," Claire snapped. "Sorry," I whispered. My hand dipped into my cardigan. I switched the recorder to voice activation and buried it deep in the soil. Then I went upstairs and waited. Laughter drifted through the vents. Glasses clinked. Words loosened. I retrieved the recorder hours later, nearly didn't make it. Henry caught me in the living room, eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" he demanded. I reacted instantly. I plunged my hand into the dirt again, scooped up soil and brought it to my mouth. "Chocolate," I whispered dreamily. Disgust washed over his face. He dragged me away, never checking the plant. The recording was safe. In my room, with shaking hands, I listened. Their voices were unmistakable. "She won't last 6 months," Henry said casually. "The medication will finish the job. And then we're free," Claire laughed. "Free." I held the recorder like a weapon. The next day was his birthday. Guests, champagne, sympathy. He planned to announce my decline, to erase me publicly. But I had already sent the evidence and a coded message to the one person who would understand, a former student. Now a prosecutor, 2 words, 1 warning. He arrived as Henry raised his glass. I descended the stairs in a dress Henry had hidden away, my voice steady, my mind clear. When I pressed play, the room froze, the saint shattered. The police lights followed, handcuffs clicked, Henry screamed. Claire cried. I stood still, finally visible. A year later, I sit on my porch with tea and sunlight. The house is mine, my mind is mine. Henry lives in the facility he chose for me. Sometimes I visit. I bring candy, blue candy, and I leave it where he can see it. Justice tastes sweet, but survival is the real victory, and some lessons are only learned when the poison stops working. They thought the story ended with handcuffs. They were wrong. The real reckoning begins after the applause fades. The weeks following the arrest passed in a strange, hollow blur. The house that once felt like a prison now echoed with unfamiliar quiet. No pills lined up on the counter, no watchful eyes tracking my movements, no whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Freedom, I learned, is disorienting when you've been conditioned to fear your own thoughts. The doctors were cautious at first. Blood tests confirmed what the recorder had already exposed: prolonged chemical suppression, administered without medical necessity. One specialist looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Your cognition is intact." "You were never declining." I cried then, not loudly, just enough to let the truth settle. The charges stacked quickly: elder abuse, financial exploitation, attempted homicide, conspiracy. The words felt surreal, as if they belonged to someone else's life. Henry's carefully constructed reputation collapsed overnight. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Former colleagues stopped returning calls. The saint had fallen. Claire took a deal almost immediately. She testified in exchange for leniency, blaming manipulation, money, desperation. The court listened. It always does. She received a sentence, but not the one I would have chosen. Henry never made it to trial. The stress did what years of pills could not. A massive stroke left him half paralyzed, his speech broken, his arrogance silenced, assets frozen, accounts seized, insurance revoked. The state placed him in a publicly funded care facility. The same kind he'd chosen for me. I wish I could say I felt satisfaction immediately. I didn't. What I felt was something quieter, a deep, steady reclaiming. Each day without sedation sharpened my senses. Colors returned, words flowed again. I began writing in the mornings, filling notebooks with thoughts I'd been told were disappearing. I kept the house. Not out of nostalgia, but defiance. I opened the doors to others like me, women and men who suspected something was wrong but had been told they were imagining it. We met twice a week. We shared notes, bank statements, strategies. Language, gaslighting loses power when it's named. On the anniversary of the party, I drove alone for the first time in years. The road to the facility was long and bleak, lined with strip malls and silence. Henry was smaller than I remembered. Reduced, afraid, I brought him water. I always do. I am not cruel. I refuse to become him. Before I left, I placed a single blue candy on the table beside his bed, just one. A reminder, not of revenge, but of truth. Surviving the monster is one thing, but what do you do when you finally realize the monster was built on your silence? The most dangerous lies don't disappear when the villain is gone. They linger, waiting to be believed again. Life didn't snap back into place the way people expect it to. Recovery isn't cinematic. It's quiet, incremental, sometimes brutal in its slowness. There were days my hands still shook. Days when I'd pause mid-sentence, fear tightening my chest, wondering if the fog was returning. Trauma leaves echoes, and gaslighting teaches your mind to question itself long after the manipulator is gone. That was the lie I had to unlearn. I returned to teaching, but not in lecture halls. I taught in my living room around a long wooden table that once held forged paperwork. Now it held notebooks, legal pamphlets, cups of tea. We called it the Lantern Circle. People came with whispers, adult children unsure of sudden power of attorney requests, spouses confused by unexplained medication changes, elders afraid to speak because they'd already been labeled difficult. I taught them what I'd relearned the hard way. Keep copies, trust your instincts, never surrender all control at once. And most importantly, confusion that benefits someone else is never accidental. Some nights after everyone left, I'd sit alone in the quiet house and feel the weight of it all press in. I'd remember how close I came to disappearing without a mark, how easily the story could have ended differently. People ask if I hate Henry. I don't. Hatred would give him too much space in my mind. What I feel instead is clarity. He didn't destroy me because I was weak. He targeted me because I trusted, because I believed partnership meant protection. That lesson cost me dearly, but it gave me purpose. The prosecutor, my former student, visits sometimes. We talk literature, justice, how easily narratives can be rewritten when the wrong person controls the voice. He once asked if I regretted not exposing Henry sooner. I told him no, survival doesn't follow moral timelines, it follows opportunity. On my porch, with sunlight warming my face, I feel something close to peace. Not naive peace, earned peace. The kind that knows darkness intimately and still chooses to stand in the light. The house breathes again. The walls hold laughter instead of fear, and my voice, once medicated into silence, carries farther than it ever did before. But even when the truth is spoken, there's one final question that never stops whispering. How many stories like mine never get told? People think survival is the end of the story. It isn't. Survival is only the point where the responsibility begins. I used to believe danger announced itself loudly with raised voices, slammed doors, obvious cruelty. I was wrong. Real danger arrives politely. It wears credentials. It speaks softly and tells you it knows what's best for you. That is what makes it so effective. When news of my case spread, messages began arriving from strangers. Some were short, others were pages long. Sons, daughters, spouses, neighbors, all circling the same fear but lacking the language to name it. She seems different since her husband took over her meds. My father says he's fine, but his bank account is empty. They tell me I'm overreacting. I read every message. Because I remembered exactly how that uncertainty felt, like standing on shifting ground while everyone around you insists the earth is solid. The lantern's circle grew. What began as half a dozen chairs became a full room, then 2 rooms. We brought in attorneys, pharmacists, patient advocates. We taught people how to ask questions without apologizing, how to document without paranoia, how to protect themselves without shame. The hardest lesson was always the same one: love does not require obedience. Control disguised as care is still control. I stopped visiting Henry after the 3rd time, not out of anger but closure. The man who tried to erase me no longer held power over my choices, not even emotionally. He existed only as a cautionary tale, a footnote in a much larger story. On the anniversary of the day I swallowed my last blue pill, I hosted an open meeting. Standing at the front of the room, I saw faces filled with recognition, that moment when someone realizes they are not broken, not imagining things, not alone. That moment is everything. I ended the meeting with a simple statement. If someone benefits from your confusion, I said, they are not trying to heal you. The room was silent. Then someone began to clap, others followed. I went home that night and stood in front of the mirror again, the same hallway mirror that once frightened me. The woman staring back was older, marked, but her eyes were steady, certain. I spoke my name aloud and there was no hesitation. Because the most dangerous prison isn't made of walls, it's built from doubt, and someone is always hoping you stay inside it. The greatest revenge isn't exposure, it's making sure the same trap can never close around someone else again. People still ask me how I knew when to stop pretending, how I found the exact moment to step out of the role I was forced to play. The truth is uncomfortable. I didn't wait until I felt brave. I waited until I understood that silence would kill me faster than fear ever could. That's the part no one likes to admit. Survival isn't about strength, it's about timing. About recognizing the narrow window where action is still possible and taking it even while your hands are shaking. I keep the recorder locked in a drawer now, not as a trophy but as a reminder. Evil rarely announces itself. It documents itself casually, arrogantly, assuming no one is listening. Someone always is. When new members join the lantern circle, they often arrive apologetic. They whisper. They worry about being dramatic. I stop them gently. Manipulation thrives on politeness, I tell them. Abuse survives on your hesitation. The room always stills at that, because deep down they already know. I've learned that memory isn't just recall, it's ownership. When someone else decides what you remember, what you forgot, what you imagined, they are trying to author your life for you. Never let that happen, not to your parents, not to your partner, not to yourself. I don't tell my story because I enjoy revisiting it. I tell it because stories like mine don't start with villains, they start with trust. And trust, once weaponized, becomes one of the sharpest tools there is. Today, my life is quiet in the best way. Mornings with tea, afternoons with purpose, evenings where my thoughts belong entirely to me. No pills I didn't choose, no explanations demanded, no fear of being told I imagined it all. If you take nothing else from this story, take this: your clarity is not a flaw, your questions are not symptoms. And anyone who asks you to surrender your voice for your own good should never be the one holding the pen. Because the moment you stop doubting yourself is the moment their power disappears forever. If you're still listening, this part is for you, because surviving the story is one thing, but carrying its lesson forward is what gives it meaning. I used to think the worst thing that could happen to a person was losing their memory. I was wrong. The worst thing is being convinced your memory no longer belongs to you. What nearly destroyed me wasn't age or illness or weakness. It was authority paired with patience, a calm voice, a clean reputation, a lie repeated gently enough that it began to sound like truth. That is how people disappear while still breathing. I stand here now, clear-minded, present, and fully myself, because I stopped accepting someone else's version of my reality. And I need you to hear this clearly. If something in your life feels wrong, confusing, or quietly diminishing, that feeling matters. Confusion that isolates you is not care. Medication you're not allowed to question is not protection. Love that requires your silence is not love at all. I didn't win because I was fearless. I won because I listened to the small, stubborn voice inside me that refused to go quiet even when everything else was telling me to surrender. That voice exists in you too. Whether you're watching this because it's a story or because it feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to know something important. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to verify. You are allowed to protect yourself even from the people closest to you, especially from the people closest to you. If my story leaves you unsettled, let it. Discomfort is often the first step toward clarity. Talk to someone you trust. Look at your documents. Learn the names of what's being given to you. Truth has a way of shrinking fear once it's brought into the light. I didn't get my life back all at once. I rebuilt it piece by piece, and every piece mattered. And now, by telling this story, I pass the lesson forward. If this video resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. Like this video if you believe truth should never be buried, and comment your thoughts below, whether it's something you noticed, something you've experienced, or simply to let others know they're not alone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and most of all, thank you for believing that light deserves to win. Because the moment you trust your own voice again, no one can ever silence you.